Okay, we're going to start this video by looking at BREEAM, which is one of the first rating systems in the world. It establishes an environmental assessment method and was developed in the UK in 1990. So a lot of people think about LEED and the US Green Building Council, which has done great work. However, there were people out there before LEED. And BREEAM looks at all building types. It's multi-attribute, water, energy, etc. It's multi-tiered, meaning that you can get lots of different levels of success. And I would say that BREEAM is really responsible. Really, the people that invented BREEAM really started the ball rolling and thinking about rating systems as a way to organize people's behaviors towards something that's very effective. Now, the LEED rating system will be covered in great detail in week 2 of this course. So we'll look forward to that. But it's also a multi-attribute system like BREEAM, multi-level. It's third-party verified, and actually BREEAM is also. It's based on a lot of relative metrics. So in many cases, you have to do better than a baseline. In some cases, it has some absolutes as well. But really, you have to admit that LEED has transformed the industry. It really took us from greenwashing and really superficial greening efforts to something that's very legitimate, very validated, and now has created a platform by which other rating systems can build upon, like Passive House, like Living Building Challenge, for example. So it has plateaued. I have a feeling that they have plans to unplateau it. But right now you're seeing a diversification of rating systems out there. Now, what's wonderful about LEED is it's tied to ASHRAE 90.1, which is a standard that drives the building codes in the US. So when ASHRAE 90.1 changes its baseline energy requirements for code, it automatically makes LEED more ambitious. And really I think that's one of the great strengths of LEED is it's driven by and connected to other rating systems and other work that other people have done. It's pretty amazing. For example, GreenGuard is a rating system that targets low chemical and particle emissions by products. So when you choose your paint, you can choose a GreenGuard paint or not. And what's important about that really is if we think about Americans especially spending 95% of their time indoors, specifying materials that do not off-gas or that off-gas things that have very low toxins are pretty critical. It is a single attribute system. You either get it or you don't, so there's no gamification. And it's single tiered. You either get it or, single attribute meaning it only looks at air quality. Single tiered meaning you get it or you don't. And again, what LEED does that I think is very clever, it references GreenGuard. So if you can meet GreenGuard for your products, you're contributing to the success and or score of your LEED rating system. Now, Cradle to Cradle has emerged as really a powerful framework like GreenGuard to understand materials. It goes way beyond just interior finishes. But what I really like about Cradle to Cradle is it's really trying to close the loop on the materials, flows, construction, manufacturing, waste, etc. It was developed by McDonough and Bronhart, a brilliant multidisciplinary team. And now it's certified by third-party companies that are associated with Cradle to Cradle that actually do the certifying. So you can now have a Cradle to Cradle certified knowing then that the things that you're putting into your building from a materials flow standpoint have really been optimized to their fullest. It is multi-attribute and multi-level, which I think is great to give some flexibility. And it's a critical tool in closing the loop on pollution and wasted energy in the materials generation process. Now I'm not going to go through this whole diagram in detail, partly because I don't fully understand it, but some of the brilliance of this diagram is we have biological nutrients or sources for materials, and we have technical sources for nutrients, for sources for materials. And when we make materials, we can use both or either. And either of those have different aspects about how they create waste. Obviously, biological nutrients can go back into the ground and decompose. And technical nutrients can be recycled to generate products that can be combined with organic units to do that. Ultimately, all of that comes into a manufacturing faculty where there are 5 criteria to be understood. 100% renewable energy use, water stewardship, social responsibility of the people working there, material reutilization and recyclability, and material health and impact. Quite a varied and powerful way of thinking about materials and really transforming the way we think about materials, and has had a great impact on the LEED rating system. It actually contributes to the LEED rating system as well. If you were selecting furniture for your building, you might use BIFMA. And BIFMA is a multi-level point system for office furniture. It's third-party and multi-attribute certification. And if you were picking furniture and you wanted to be sustainable, why not just go in and use one of these rating systems which have been vetted by multiple people to generate the most fair and positive system out there. Really proud of Perkins and Will, which generated what's called the precautionary list, or what I call the transparency list, which is they looked at all of the chemicals and all the products that they were certifying, built a website on their own money, and showed you what all kinds of chemicals are in there. And what it's done is it's pushing the marketplace, pushing industrial suppliers of materials to be more transparent and to be more sustainable in the materials that they generate. It's really a very powerful movement by Perkins and Will. Very similar to Living Building Challenge's Red List in the fact that, well, actually not similar, but similar in terms of intention to try to drive the industry towards removing toxins from their products. And we'll talk about the Red List when we talk about Living Building Challenge, which you've probably already heard. And now we have Architecture 2030. So the AIA found themselves out of the game of sustainability with the void that they created for United States Green Building Council by not taking sustainability seriously. And so they've created the 2030 Challenge, which I think is actually pretty good. But it is focused primarily on energy emissions or greenhouse gas emissions from projects. It wants to slow the growth of the rate of those. So it's reversing our emissions from buildings, and they believe what are tied to carbon emissions are tied to climate change and the global warming. And so the idea is to generate buildings that use less fossil fuels to deal with that. You can also do communities. And now AIA is joining the sustainability movement finally. Not really a holistic system, but certainly a useful system. Here's their main diagram. Sorry for the fuzziness there. What they're trying to show there, sorry about that, is that today we're looking at 60% carbon reduction in our buildings, which actually isn't true. We'd like to believe that we're at 60%. And the idea is that in 2015 we'd be at 70%, 80% reduction of greenhouse gases, 90%, and finally we would have what's called carbon neutral construction by the year 2030. Carbon neutral is very different than net zero energy, and I'll get into that a little bit as we go further into this presentation. The Sustainable Sites Initiative is really wonderful. It says that it is really picking up where LEED left off on sites. A lot of landscape architects that I know were frustrated with sustainable sites within LEED and tried to do something that would be more ambitious. And they've come up with really an amazing rating system that is not a first party anymore. The Sustainable Sites Initiative has been adopted by the Green Building Certifications Institute as a way to now make this a third party system, which is long overdue and really, really, really important to the vitality of our ecosystems. It's based on a lot of absolute requirements and a lot of prerequisites. And it captures credits that LEED was pretty lenient on. It's a lot more ambitious than LEED, but looks at things that you wouldn't normally think of, like social equity and sense of place, which supports my assertion that we need to use a quadruple bottom line of understanding sustainability, thinking about it through an integral theory framework. So it's very holistic and I think very far reaching in its design. Here are the categories. I'm not going to read them now, but I want to point to a couple. Pre-design assessment and planning. We talk about site inventory and analysis, and I have to say that architects of all of the professions are probably the worst at this, and I think that we need to spend a lot more time looking at our sites prior to actually moving forward. Thinking about human health and well-being in a very direct way, the idea of a strong community, the idea of stewardship. This is expressed in this, and finally, operations and maintenance. One of the things that we're seeing about sustainability is it requires a lot more maintenance than standard construction and projects. We can think about what's going on in college campuses with what's called AccuPuck, which is the climate commitment for carbon neutrality. It's a first-party reporting system. And basically, so for example, Philadelphia University is striving to be carbon neutral by 2030. This is what people have signed on to. It's a pledge-based idea, and it is supported on many levels by STARS, which was generated by ASHE. And STARS is a third-party certification program designed to greenify your campus. And I've used it as a framework here at PhillyU to think about how to green our campus, and it's extremely well done, very comprehensive and very multi-attribute and very demanding. And so what if we could think about campuses instead of buildings? Think about the impact that an entire campus would have versus a single building. This could ultimately be used to change our behaviors on campus and drive sustainability. Furthermore, net zero energy is something that people are just going for. Forget all the other ones. And so if we think here about a total building energy use, think of this as your typical energy use and you want to get it to zero. How do you do that? Well, you jump over what's called the razor's edge. And if you watched my first course, you would know what that is. and we want to get to zero. So zero is not really zero. If you're using renewable energy, which I'll show you, you don't have to get to zero in the design of your building. You just have to get very low so that when you put solar in, you'll be very effective. The way we get to zero is we start with our intention and values, changing the way we think and the way others think. We change our behaviors and attitudes. We use passive design principles like Passive House, for example, pretty powerful. We use efficient technologies, and we use energy efficient appliances. When we do all of those things, we generate what's called negawatts, which are units of energy that are never used. A very powerful way of thinking about passive design. Now, what's left? We have to get to zero. We still have a little bit of energy left. Here we use our renewable energy. So now we use the smallest amount of energy possible to generate a net zero energy building. Now, the mistake I made in this lecture is it's really called net zero energy ready buildings because we don't really know what the behaviors will be like inside the building. We don't know how people will use their thermostat. So we can only design it based on certain assumptions about behavior. Clients do this because they want to get energy independence. They want to avoid the pain of higher energy prices. They're worried about disruptions to the energy grid, and they want to minimize their carbon footprint. So there's a lot of reasons why companies are moving towards net zero. New York City, for example, is doing net zero energy schools now. It's pretty amazing. So what we're seeing here is a lot of clients don't want to deal with the holistic multi-attribute-ness of many rating systems. They just want to deal with energy and carbon. They feel that is the worst and probably the most significant area to work in. And every day there's a new rating system that comes out. Now we have the Well Building Institute that's come out with the Well system, which looks at the fact that I talked about earlier with humans living inside and spending time inside at 95% rate. And we're seeing that we could make much healthier environments. So what Well Building Institute is trying to do is generate a system by which people can find more human health and comfort inside buildings, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. And it's really definitely the newest rating system. So you know what? There's lots of other rating systems that I didn't even cover yet, but we did make it. We're at the end of all of these different rating systems, and we haven't even covered LEED yet, by the way. So the bad news is there's so many options out there, so many choices, it's overwhelming. The good news is there are so many choices out there, and that means that this is a real thing in our economy. I didn't cover Energy Star Portfolio, HERS rating system, and more. Actually, I did cover them. Sorry about that. Here they are. And so that pretty much ends this lecture on rating systems. I hope you enjoyed it.